The Indianapolis Colts are running it back with head coach and general manager next season, and perhaps quarterback. Should Anthony Richardson get another shot in 2025? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets if you win or lose your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com, or I guess your resident defensive coordinator search nerd at horseshoehuddle.com. That is my job right now. And I am joined today, as always, by Jake Arthur. I would say boots on the ground, but he wasn't able to get his boots on the ground today because of an illness running through the Colts facility. Caused a certain
just
press
one
conference.
guy, as far as we know.
Yeah, one guy to move back a press conference. So boots on the ground will be back, obviously, at some point this week. But we have
not a tone-deaf franchise.
Yes, that's true. That's true. We have an Anthony Richardson episode for you guys today. We're going to do our standard breakdown that we've done for other people in the organization in terms of making the case for keeping Anthony Richardson as the starter, making the case against Anthony Richardson as the starter, and then talking about the final verdict. What do we think actually happens with the Colts? And what do we think we would do with Anthony Richardson? So far, I think we're batting perfect right now, Jake. I know we've said that we would lean firing Chris Ballard, but the Colts would probably keep him. We said that we would lean firing Gus Bradley, and the Colts would fire him. So we're doing pretty good with this series so far. So let's start with Anthony Richardson. The case for keeping Anthony Richardson as the starter, because obviously he's going to be on this team regardless next season. Rookie contract, it's fairly cheap. Like, you're not going to cut the guy or anything like that. But the case for continuing him as a starter really comes down to how he played in year one and how he played kind of to finish this season. Like, it wasn't great to finish the season this year, but it was better. And the fact that you've already invested so much in him and he's still a really young player. If you do age adjusted, track that he's on compared to most quarterbacks, by their age 22 season, he's on a pretty solid pace right now to be where a lot of quarterbacks are. Now, a lot of the quarterbacks, their age 22 season is their rookie year. So he's about the same level where a lot of rookie quarterbacks are at the end of year two. But I do think there is some optimism in his underlying numbers that you can hang your hat on. But ultimately, the biggest case for keeping him as your starter next year is we took him with the 4th overall pick. We've invested a lot of time and resources into this guy. The offense is kind of built around him. And a lot of guys' jobs depend on him working or not working. So it kind of comes down to you essentially have to start him next season. And honestly, there's not even that many better options over him next season, just in terms of upside. We're going to go through them in the later part of the segment. There are guys you can bring in for competition or to be prime backups to Richardson next season. But even any of these guys at their max level doesn't give you what Richardson at his max level could give you. So it's just more advantageous to keep riding this Anthony Richardson project out until the end. And I expect that's what's going to happen in 2025.
Yeah, I do think it makes good sense to have him as the starter in this next year, just because everyone knew you were kind of signing on for a long ride. And then so you at least want to see it to year 3. Now, this is make or break. 2025, for sure at this point. So I think there have been enough flashes to see what it's going to look like. You've got to have some patience early in the year, but I think you've seen some extremes to where that leash can be kind of cut off relatively quickly if it looks like a disaster like it did at the beginning of this year. But I mean, he's won games, and the Colts have been able to do some things with him that I think they really hoped they'd be able to do when they're thinking long-term about him. I always bring up the fact that he's helped them win games late in comeback situations. That is something you can't just find. Guys, a lot of them just seem to not have that ability to rise up when the team absolutely needs it. So you've seen him take over games and lead the Colts to victory with his arm, and you've seen him and Jonathan Taylor team up and use their legs to ice games and put teams away. Those are two huge things that the Colts envisioned doing with him and Jonathan Taylor long term, and you have seen those. So I think being able to check off those boxes buys him a little more patience to see if you can round out some of those crazy jagged edges to make him like. I don't think his stats are ever going to look efficient. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But can you get explosive, productive plays often enough to make it this whole ride worth it? I think is what we're looking at this point. He's just never going to have good quarterback numbers. It's going to be still closer to feast or famine, boom or bust, I think. But it's just how often you're able to get those big time plays.
Yeah, and my final case for giving him at least a little bit of next year to continue as a starter is he really has these four pillars of just elite traits that I think you can build on. And those elite traits are his rushing ability, his sack avoidance, his clutch ability late in games, like you mentioned there, Jake, and the big play ability. Those are four things that a lot of quarterbacks would kill to have, and he already has those. Now, he has other things that bring him down to being one of the worst starters in football right now. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that he's anything better than that right now. But I understand seeing a 22-year-old quarterback with those four pillars and saying, man, we owe it to ourselves to just ride this thing out until the end. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We all get fired anyway. Let's ride this thing out. So I totally get the appeal there. I think there's a lot of reason to be pessimistic, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But one thing I do want to make sure we keep in this segment, even though this is the pro Anthony Richardson segment, is regardless of, you're keeping him as a starter or you're replacing him, you need to have another quality quarterback on this roster that's capable of playing games. Because even if you go into next season, Anthony Richardson is your starter, odds are he's going to miss some games. He's not going to play a full 17 games. So in the way the NFL works is you can't afford just to drop the 3 or 4 or 5 games that your quarterback missed, or heck, with Anthony Richardson, it could be more than that. He's missed over half of the NFL games he's been available to play at this point. So you need to have a capable backup. And you have a lot of names here, Jake. You have guys names down for competition with him in camp. You have names for backup. Who are a couple that catch your eye from the names that you have that could compete with Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I'll preface this by saying the options are not great. So like I'm going to name off a bunch of unsexy names, but that's just the reality of where we are right now. It's not a great group. Whether you're trading for someone, whether you're getting someone for competition or just insurance. So looking at guys who could at least, I think, provide competition to Anthony. You're looking at Justin Fields, Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson, if he's let go. He might be on a 1-year deal. But regardless, it doesn't look like it's going great there in Pittsburgh. And then Daniel Jones from Minnesota. Those are guys who have had some recent success. And again, that's just where we are right now. Some of these guys could be reclamation projects. Maybe it's not too late in their careers. But then you're looking at a list of backups, guys who have played in the NFL, and that list is even uglier. I've got Jarrett Stidham, Jacoby Brissett, Marcus Mariota, Andy Dalton, Trey Lance, Drew Lock, Mac Jones, Taylor Heineke, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mason Rudolph, and Cooper Rush. Now, a handful of those guys, through the insane quarterback carousel that has been the Indianapolis Colts since 2019, a lot of these guys have been connected to the Colts, or there's been genuine smoke there. So some of these names are realistic. Again, it's a gross group, but that's where we are now.
Yeah, we'll see. Shane Steichen typically prefers quarterbacks he's worked with, so maybe a Joe Flacco coming back could certainly be in the cards.
No, it's
I don't. It certainly could be. I don't know.
We've seen it.
The Colts do like to change it up, I guess. But if we go away from the Shane Steichen grabbing a quarterback that he's worked with in the past, I do think he would prefer more of a quick game passer, like guy who can get the ball out of his hands, like more of a point guard distributor. So you're looking at guys like an Andy Dalton, a Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo, Cooper Rush, Mason Rudolph. I think those would be the types that would intrigue Shane Steichen. But we'll certainly see what they do in terms of competition. But at the end of the day, they need to have someone who's capable of playing football next year. And maybe
Mhm.
that's a great sell to these backup quarterbacks is you're going to get like 5, 6, 7, maybe all 17 games if you come here to Indy, because the Colts quarterback has struggled to stay healthy. And that's kind of what we're going to lead off our next segment with is we kind of made the case in this first segment for why you would keep Anthony Richardson as a starter next year. Now let's make the case for why you look to replace him. Like why you would be completely out on Anthony Richardson after 2 years of his NFL career.
From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything that you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Something that's got my eye this weekend, Chargers-Texans. The Chargers are 2.5-point favorites in Houston. This one's a little sneaky to me. The Texans are still a sneaky, scrappy team occasionally. And the Chargers are also capable of getting stomped at any point. You know what I mean? Like, look at that Buccaneers game not too long ago. So I think that's a very interesting one for me. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Okay, so on to this one. In this scenario, Anthony Richardson, you've seen enough. You don't want to give up on him. He's still going to be on the roster, but the Colts decide that he cannot be their starter any longer. You're ready to get someone else in there. Again, the options are not great, but let's just start with why you would kind of want to get to that point, Zach. So the completion percentage has been so bad that it basically tells you the passing game may never be efficient, and you just may not be able to get rhythm in the passing game. And there are going to be some games where you probably need to pass 40 times. And can you do that with Anthony? So that might be something that they, really kind of turns them off. And kind of tied into that is inefficiency passing short. That, you can't necessarily have a full, complete passing game there. Joe Flacco even was able to give you some semblance of some short rhythmic stuff. So that, and then there could just be the fact where the best ability is availability, and Anthony's missed 19 games through 2 years. They could just say, we love the upside there. Maybe it works out, but we have got to be able to depend on our starter being out there.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I really understand where other people are coming from when it comes to being completely out on Anthony Richardson. The first one really is the injury history. I mean, he's had 4 pretty big injuries through 2 seasons. And if you look at, this is not even just looking at quarterbacks, but you look at other Chris Ballard draft picks in the past that have had similar injury issues, they typically don't ever get back on track. Guys like Paris Campbell, Juju Brents right now, Jelani Woods, those are other guys who have had a similar type of run through 2 years. And again, with these Richardson injuries, these are not small injuries. He had a concussion early last season that caused him to miss 2 games. He had this throwing shoulder injury that caused him to miss the rest of the season when it happened. He had the hip injury early this year that caused him to miss, I think, 3.5 games. And then he had the injury at the end of the season to his back, which apparently he's been dealing with since his 8th grade year in middle school. So These are long-lasting, serious injuries that are pretty scary. The back injury honestly scares me the most there, and that's the one we've most recently heard about. And the fact that he's only 22, and these are already the injuries that has piled up on his body, that's concerning for me, especially for a player that has to rely on his physicality and his rushing ability to be an effective player in terms of like success rate and EPA per play and stuff like that on offense right now. So that's super concerning right there. In terms of his play on the field, again, I think his rookie season and what he showed post-benching, you can make a case for continually giving him time. But what he showed prior to his benching, especially the couple games leading up to it, was simply not good enough. And they weren't really showing many flashes or positive plays in there. Hit a super high average depth of target and super high, where he was targeting plays down the field. And you could say that's the offense, but when Joe Flacco got in there, the yards per attempt and not yards per attempt, the average depth of target came down and became more of a normal thing. The only time we really see a quarterback with an average depth of target as high as what Richardson's had was when Tim Tebow was a quarterback, another quarterback with a super low completion percentage and a lot of inaccuracies and a lot of issues going through the offense and getting down to his checkdowns and taking underneath throws. So look, I love the aggressiveness that he plays with. I love how he likes to force things and just get things down the field. But we do need to sacrifice a little bit of the explosives to have a functioning offense. And that's something he needs to realize. Going forward, you just can't function as an offense only throwing vertical balls and only throwing deep intermediate plays. I know the Colts do bear some other responsibility for that as well. A lot of vertical plays called for him, but I do think he needs to be quicker about getting to his checkdowns and stuff like that. And just overall, like even after the benching, I think his ability against pressure really became a mess. And maybe that was with the back injury. He was a little stiffer getting out and throwing on the move, but those issues reared their ugly head late in the season. So there's a lot of things he really needs to clean up and go and improve on going forward. And if you're looking at his full body of work through 2 years, I know he's only played the 17 games, whatever. So you can say like, oh, he's only had one full season, but like it's been 2 full years since they drafted him. We can't just wish away, time on the field. I know he hasn't had the reps on the field, but how many years do you get before, that you're just the guy who misses time and stuff like that. So I understand the complaints that people have. I understand the concerns people have and why people are out on him. I do think his age is a good thing in terms of just he's still not that old compared to where most quarterbacks are after 2 years in the NFL. So you still kind of have some time to mold him and go from there. But there are a lot of concerns right now with Anthony Richardson. I'm not in the camp of giving up on him, but I completely understand if the Colts had an opportunity to improve this offseason if they went out and improved. Now, we're going to talk about it here to finish up this segment. I don't really think there's many opportunities to improve this offseason in terms of getting like a clear upgrade over him because, my gosh, the quarterback options this offseason are an absolute train wreck. Like, if this were a couple years ago when the Colts were engaged in talks for like Matthew Stafford and like Baker Mayfield was a free agent, that was an interesting one. And even the year when they traded for Carson Wentz, like on paper, that one was understandable. There's nothing like that this offseason. There's nothing interesting this offseason. We're talking, I'm going to throw the first name. Sam Darnold's the only maybe adequate name out there. And we have no clue if he's going to turn back into a pumpkin like he just did against the Detroit Lions a couple days ago with a chance to lock up the 1 seed. So outside of that, it is some brutal options. And personally, I mean, I know I'm kind of giving away what I'm going to say in the next segment, but I'd rather just stick with the young kid than go to any of these options. But Jake, give me some of these other options that we could look at to outright replace Anthony Richardson if the Colts wanted to.
Yeah, so Darnold is obviously kind of the belle of the ball there, free agent. He's obviously had his most success just coming off his best season, Pro Bowl with Kevin O'Connell. I mean, obviously J.J. McCarthy is waiting there in the wings, but Darnold could be so comfortable and have had think so fondly of his time in Minnesota that he decides to return if they'll have him back. So there's Darnold. When you're looking at trade possibilities, you're looking at Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins, or just to make it spicy, let's figure out what's going on with J.J. McCarthy. Now, let me throw this option in the pot with you as well. Minnesota Vikings, they were about ready to sacrifice it all for Anthony Richardson in that draft a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin O'Connell obviously still thinks very fondly of Anthony, judging from all that, the video stuff and the very encouraging message that he sent to Anthony after the benching. Do you see what's up, sending Anthony to Minnesota and getting J.J. McCarthy back? And then Anthony sits behind Sam Darnold for like a year or something with Kevin O'Connell in a system where both sides feel really good about it. Like Anthony feels embraced by Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings, and the Vikings get the guy who they maybe wanted to develop all along. And I don't know. It's an interesting option nonetheless. It's better than saying Kirk Cousins, come on down, be the next retirement home participant, and the Colts being your final stop in the NFL, because that's what it's been the last 5-6 years.
I will give you that final point, Jake. I will definitely give you that final point that it's much better than a Kirk Cousins or a Derek Carr. Unless those guys were willing to come here on like minimum deals, then sure, whatever. Everybody can come here for a minimum deal. I'll give out minimum deals to anybody to come play for the Colts. But to say something about the JJ McCarthy thing, I do think it's hilarious. And I know this is me being disingenuous with my argument, but I just want to be disingenuous right now, Jake.
Let's hear it.
I do think when we have mobile quarterbacks, we are so quick to put the injury prone label on them. But then when it's a guy who kind of plays around the pocket, we don't put it on there. And I'm not saying JJ McCarthy is injury prone, but look, we're complaining about Anthony Richardson missing over half of his NFL starts. JJ McCarthy's missed every single one. JJ McCarthy, 0% of games played in the NFL, all due to injury.
JJ McCarthy has a serious knee injury right now.
Serious injury. So we want to trade for a guy with a serious knee injury to the Colts to come to Indy? When I just rattled off all of those Chris Ballard guys who couldn't play anymore because they had multiple injuries through a couple years, we want to trade for a guy currently on an injury?
Chris is an Achilles guy, which means obviously Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers are the ways to go. They will be another year removed from their Achilles. That is Chris's chef kiss. He wants it.
Yeah, no, I just do think it's funny that we had to throw the injury prone thing on Richardson after his first season when he actually played in his first season despite having his injury. McCarthy could even make it to his first season. We can put the injury prone label on him. Don't worry. But no, I think the JJ McCarthy thing is a little funny. I don't think it's super realistic whatsoever. I think it's more likely the Vikings just franchise tag Darnold, see if he turns into a pumpkin, and then if he does turn into a pumpkin, then you have McCarthy, the guy you invest a top pick in. But those are the options out there. They're pretty rough. And I think that's a perfect way to segue into our final segment, which is what's the final verdict? Do the Colts give Anthony Richardson another full season or at least a good chunk of the season to see if he really has the stuff, or do they move on? We'll talk about it here in just a second. But first, it's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most out of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns. And for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has got you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. Jake and I have been playing for a while now, and we are having a blast here. Jake actually mentioned the other day that he's looking at Ladd McConkey to go more than 72.5 yards and Derrick Henry for more than 1.5 touchdowns. I think those are some great picks there. Ladd McConkey and Derrick Henry, two of the best players in the league this year. Very different spectrums there, but two very good players this year for the NFL. And look, Prize Picks is so easy to use, and Jake and I, again, we love how fast the payouts are. Seriously, it's the best part of it. Seriously, I've gotten paid out in as little as 15 minutes when my picks hit, plus the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts, and even more value to my lineups. So here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game.
And did Rocket Money help you guys find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you weren't paying twice for? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a little personal assistant for your finances. After all, it's the beginning of the year. New year, new me. Let's turn our finances around. Rocket Money is the perfect resource for that. They're a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. They monitor your spending, and they even help lower your bills so that you can grow savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even your goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when you use all the app's premium features. For me and my wife, again, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. We're living in a day and age where all the streaming services have essentially become cable again. We are subscribed to a million different things, and things merge, and you don't need to be a member of this anymore, blah, blah, blah. Rocket Money helps you track down all those things you're unnecessarily spending for and eliminates them. Plus, they've got their goals feature. We've been able to automatically set aside money for our futures, no stressing about budgeting every month. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Okay, Zach, so we have established the free agent and trade market is not great. And unless the Colts were wildly uncharacteristic and wanted to trade up to the top of the draft in case they were in love with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, it's probably not going to happen. So I say the verdict says Anthony Richardson is your de facto starter in 2025. But both of us say, regardless of if Anthony played perfectly when he was on the field, he still is only on the field half the time. And so you got to have not only competition behind him to also, keep him going, keep him engaged, which you hate to say about your quarterback, but also to provide insurance for when he gets hurt and he's not out there, because that's just the real part of this situation. So he's probably your starter for 2025, but you got to have more behind him.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think the Colts are going to go into this season, or going to go into this off season with Anthony Richardson as their established starter. I don't think they're going to make a big move for a quarterback behind him. I think it'll be, a playable name. Like I could totally see, I don't know, like a Mac Jones, or what were some of the names you had at the top there? Mac Jones. I could see a Cooper Rush or Jimmy Garoppolo, some of those like throwback pocket passers that, all the old men fall in love with because they remind them of Joe Montana. I certainly could see that for sure as being the guy they bring in, but I don't think it's going to be some super serious conversation or competition in the offseason. This is going to be Anthony Richardson's team. And I don't want to say it's his last shot, but there needs to be something. He needs to show better progression than what he's shown so far. As one of our comments said earlier in the show, this is going to be his first full healthy offseason with an NFL program, being able to go through his mechanics, being able to go through what went wrong, what went well, maybe working with Shane Steichen a little bit more rather than just rehabbing his injuries, as long as the back injury is good. I mean, and that's another wild card in all this. But I think they're going to go into the year with him as the guy. Now, if the Colts get to a point where they're 1-5 and he's looked abysmal through those 6 games, then I think we could see them make a change, because honestly, Steichen and Ballard need to make the playoffs next year if they want to stick around. Maybe. I can't say for sure with these two, but they probably need to make the playoffs next year if they want to stick around. So if you're sitting at like a 1-5 or like a 2-4 even, maybe you would make the change. But I do think he's going to get the offseason. He's going to get the preseason and get the first part of the season at the very least to show that he can be that guy they drafted as high as they did. Look, they've invested a lot into this young kid. He's still only 22 years old. He's shown some flashes. And honestly, again, if like a Matthew Stafford type of free agent or trade opportunity was out there, I could totally see the Colts being aggressive and going after that. But because there's really no option whatsoever, and again, maybe one surprises us and becomes available. Maybe Dak Prescott just comes screaming that he doesn't want to play for the Cowboys anymore, and you can maybe make a move like that. But outside of that happening, this should be Anthony Richardson's gig again next year. Should it be unopposed? Probably not. I do think the Colts should bring in competition and maybe even say it's a competition. But I don't know if they're going to even do that, because, again, they've invested so much in him. A lot of their jobs rely on this kid hitting, and they got to figure it out. They're to put it into a phrase I've seen from our boy Kenan Kasenko on Twitter recently at ViveJones007 is they got to hit snake eyes. They're rolling the dice yet again, and they got to get lucky and hit snake eyes. And I know it's a horrible place to be in for Colts fans, saying that you're relying on luck in development rather than bringing in a proven, established thing, but it's kind of what I think the Colts' only option is right now. I don't think there is a proven effective thing to get this team in the playoffs next year. Really, the best way you can really have this go is getting lucky with Anthony Richardson. So we'll see. That's what I think the Colts are going to do. It's probably what I would do in their situation as well, considering the options out there. And we'll see how it goes. 2025, hopefully better than 2024, or hopefully better than the last 8 years of Chris Ballard. I really hope it works for Anthony Richardson. It's not looking great right now, but I really hope it does work and he's able to really put it all together and have this thing click because he is so talented. It's coming from a low point right now, but hopefully they can take those positive steps next season to really make it all work. It doesn't need to be perfect next year, but let's see some real progress and some real development from him. And then we can all be optimistic again going into 2026.
I tell you what they could do to help him and make it look a little better. Go get a tight end, get you Tyler Warren, and get some offensive line depth and let this thing ride. I'm cool with the receivers right now. If you can get anything from AD Mitchell in year 2, that is awesome, but you got to get a tight end. I think you got to have better depth on the offensive line. Let that thing roll. I mean, if you know it's Anthony in 2025, which they probably do know, then you have one more year to evaluate this kid, probably throw everything in there, all chips in. We know they're really good at that. So no, I mean, you don't have to make it look like the Texans offseason and like throw the kitchen sink at your offense, but like do everything you can to your offense to ensure that like there are no glaring holes, that Anthony is fully supported. Get Jonathan Taylor a running mate, get some depth along the offensive line, and get a tight end that can play. I think if you could do those things, which is not a huge to-do list, like I think those are very doable things between free agency and the draft that can be done. Do those things, and if Anthony doesn't come through with it while he's on the field, then he's just probably not the guy.
Yeah, and then teach him the art of the check down and then stretch out that back a little bit, and we are good to go.
If he had a tight end, he could do it.
Yeah, he could stretch out his back better with a tight end. No, I do think next year is obviously the biggest year for Anthony Richardson, though. I think we all agree there, regardless of if he's the de facto starter, if there's competition, or if they bring someone else in, this next season on and off the field will be big for Anthony Richardson, and we will cover it here, obviously, all on Locked On Colts. Well, this is not the only quarterback conversation we'll have this offseason, guys. We got the draft, obviously, to talk about. I see a lot of you guys mentioning Jackson Dart in the comments. And in case you guys don't know, I love me some Jackson Dart. Maybe not for the Colts in particular, but just as a player, he's a fun player. So certainly we'll talk about draft quarterbacks and everything in future episodes. We do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Next, go find Locked On NFL. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. If you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.